Hello again. A report produced by a charity called Inquest has revealed that black men in physical tussles or unpleasant contact with the police are 7 times more likely to die than are those from the general population who are not black. This is inevitably attributed to systemic racism on the part of the police, but I have my doubts. Inquest is a registered charity with a tidy little income of £1 million a year. This is largely from the National Lottery, although some also comes from one of the usual suspects with troublemaking enterprises of this kind, namely the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. Inquest is dedicated to investigating deaths in prisons, police custody, mental hospitals and other institutional settings, and they've been sending out a lot of freedom of information requests to gather details about the ethnicity of those who died at the hands of the police between 2011 and 2021. The report is entitled "I Can't Breathe: Race, Death and British Policing." See what they did there? Worked in a neat reference to the death of George Floyd with the intention of hinting that the deaths of black men in police custody in this country are on a par with Floyd's death, that is to say, unjust and wrong. In the description to this video I give links to the report, the BBC News item on the report, and also the Charity Commission details about Inquest. I'm bound to say that something does not add up here, and this is at once obvious when you just glance at the figures given. In the course of a decade, 86 white people died following police restraint, as did 24 black people, 5 Asians, and 4 people of mixed heritage. Anybody spot the difficulty with those figures? Well, systemic racism is blamed, which I am assuming means that racist police officers are more apt to kill people who are not white. However, this must be a very strange and unusual kind of racism. Most of the racists whom I have known have disliked black people, Pakistanis and Indians with equal force. They are racist in the sense that they prefer white people to other ethnicities. I suspect that most people viewing this, whether or not they are racist themselves or whatever their views, would agree with that. Racists tend not to be picky and fussy in their racial prejudice against people who are not white. However, in Britain, there are twice as many people of Asian origin as there are black people. If the police were really being careless and brutal with prisoners and suspects who were not white, due to their systemic racism, then you might expect to see at least as many Asian people killed while being restrained. In fact, fewer than a quarter of as many Asian people died in this way as black people. Why should this be? I don't think racism alone can explain this, because otherwise the police would be mistreating Asians just as much and killing them. One explanation would be that black people do not do as they are instructed when they have encounters with the police. That is to say, they might become aggressive, or they might be more apt to attack police officers or make violent attempts to escape from custody. This would account for the figures seen just as neatly and also explain why fewer Asian people die in this way. If you pull a knife on a police officer or drive your car at him with the intention of killing him, then this can make the whole business of arrests a little bit more physically challenging, shall we say, and perhaps more likely to end in disaster. Then too, if more black people were committing crimes proportionately to white people and Asians, that too would have the effect of generating more arrests, and the more arrests there are, the more chance there is of something unpleasant taking place during an arrest. That would simply make it a statistical artifact. In other words, racial prejudice might be an explanation for what is observed, but it is perhaps not the best explanation. The BBC helpfully remind us in their report about two black men who died last year after encounters with the police. One of these was Chris Carver, who was shot dead by the police in South London. This is an example of what I was saying about behaviour precipitating some of these deaths at the hands of the police. After being asked to halt his vehicle, Carver, who had a conviction for a firearms offence, decided to embark upon a high-speed attempt to escape. So there was a big car chase through the streets of London. His vehicle was eventually boxed in and he was brought to a halt. An officer approached Carver's car on foot, whereupon an attempt was made to run the policeman over. Carver was gunning the engine and trying to break free, heading straight for the police officer. It was unfortunate that he was shot, but when you start attempting to murder a police officer, things are always apt to backfire on you. The other case the BBC mentioned was a mentally ill man called Oladeji Omishore. He was behaving very erratically in London, standing on a bridge and waving around something in what looked like a threatening fashion. In fact, he was holding a gas lighter like this, the sort of thing we use in our homes for lighting the cooker. His family insisted that he carried it to light cigarettes. I can honestly say I have never seen one of these used for that purpose. What happened was that the guy was shouting at people and behaving in a very aggressive and irrational way, waving around one of these, slashing like that, making stabbing motions with it. The police couldn't tell if it was a screwdriver or a knife and did not feel inclined to get close enough to have a proper look because he was making, as I say, slashing and jabbing motions with it and looked as if he might cut up rough. They accordingly fired a taser at him, following which he climbed up onto the parapet of a bridge and hurled himself into the River Thames, where he drowned. A tragedy indeed, but hardly, I would say, the fault of the police. I'm very sceptical about the idea that the police are deliberately killing black people more often than anybody else because they suffer from a peculiar and very specific form of racial prejudice. I think it far more likely that it is aggressive behaviour from those whom they are attempting to detain, which precipitates violent confrontations, which inevitably, from time to time, result in deaths.